Well, shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Shabbat Shalom service on tonight, April 15th, 2022. Thank you for joining me for our service on tonight. It is an exciting time. This is actually the day of Passover. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for participating in this. I certainly, as I was sitting here, I would certainly rather be having a Passover meal with family and friends. But here we are. We are here. It's still early here in California. It's just 5. So by 8 o'clock here in California, as the evening sets, we will be beginning our Passover time. And so thank you so much for joining me. Our lesson tonight, we're going to have to do a lesson tonight along. If I were home, I wouldn't be doing so much a lesson. I would be doing what we call a Passover Seder or a Passover meal with family and friends. Since I'm on the road, I'll just take that time to kind of try to go off by myself just a little bit and thank and praise God for all that he's doing in our lives and in the lives of all those that are part of our family. But Lord, give us life. Next year, we will have a Passover Seder. We had one last year in my home, and we had a great time. It's a fascinating thing to be a part of a body of believers, and at the same time, read the scriptures and see what the scriptures are saying, and then realize that people know a lot more about Easter than they do Passover, and these are believers in the body of Yeshua, our Messiah. So it's strange, but at the same time, we're grateful that through the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, he's opened our hearts and minds to understand the Torah, the first 5 books, where this foundation for everything else that in the scriptures was laying by Jehovah, our Elohim, our God, as he gave instructions to Moses. And Moses then gave those instructions to us and wrote them down. He said, write this down. And so we'll see a lot of things that are kind of repetitive in the sense of being repeated, but when you're having your mind transformed by renewed information, then we understand you have to go over it over and over and over again and from different angles to make sure we got everything that we're supposed to learn. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to allow this music to play. I don't own the rights to the music, but we're going to use it to get our hearts and minds ready to receive all that the Ruach HaKodesh will speak to us on tonight. So you can get your Bibles ready. We're going to have a lesson. It's called Kedoshim, 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 which means holiness. Our last lesson was Akre Mot, which was after the death. So then when we combine the two, we have after the death comes holiness. And so we understand a whole lot more about why these 2 lessons are taught together because of the symbolism involved in what is going on. So let's listen to the music for another minute or so, and then we'll begin our lesson. I know that in Georgia, the day of Passover has actually been completed. because in actuality, the 15th ends at sundown on the 15th. So in Georgia, Passover has already ended, but when we get into the Passover, Haggadah, or the lesson on Passover tonight, we're going to see where the Passover lamb was killed on the day of Passover, and then the meal was eaten on the first day of unleavened bread, which would be after sundown. So it was after sundown. As a matter of fact, it was at midnight when the conclusion of all the things that were brought against the people of Israel took place. So it's important as we go through this lesson, make sure you mute yourselves as you come on. As we go through this lesson, that we realize how wonderful it is to be in a place with people that have an understanding or are gaining an understanding as we continue this study of Passover, the Pesach celebration. So with that, I'm going to turn my music off, and I wish I was having a Passover Seder, but this is what has happened in my life on this particular year. So I'm trying to shut this device off, okay? So with that, thank you so much for joining us. Let us pray. Remember, get your Bibles open to Leviticus chapter 19. We're going to read Leviticus chapter 19, verses 1 through 20. I'm sorry, Leviticus 19, verse 1 through chapter 20, verse 27. The title of that lesson is Lesson 30 of 52 lessons, but we'll get to that as we begin our PowerPoint presentation. And I want to thank my daughter Kanaya for joining me on tonight. I see she has joined. I know that she is now in Georgia, and were I home, she would be at our Passover Seder taking place right about this time in Georgia. But I don't know what's going on with my screen, but here we go. But next year, Kanaya, we will have our Passover Pesach, or our Passover meal and celebration. And we'll have that ready for you on next year, because I know she is very much into a lot of what we're going to talk about on tonight in terms of Shabbat, or the Sabbath. So with that, let us pray. Jehovah, our God, we thank and praise you for this time. We thank you for this season of Pesach, meaning Passover. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit, that has come to guide us into all truth. Thank you for opening up our hearts and our minds to receive your word. And not only that, but you empower us to be doers and not hearers only. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah, we pray. Amen. Okay, so with that, I'm going to change my screen, and we're going to get into our presentation for tonight. Let me get this where it belongs. All right. And ooh, it did it again. All right, I can't figure out how to move that over any, so. All right, we're gonna do that. All right. Now, this is our Shabbat Shalom service. Shabbat, because this is the night of the beginning of Shabbat. Shabbat begins on Friday night and carries over until Saturday night at that time. Jehovah has given us instructions that there are blessings on this day. So when you properly celebrate when the Sabbath is, and not the made-up celebration that takes place on Sunday, but the actual time, then the blessings of that day, you receive them in greater measure. When you are following the teachings that would teach people to worship and serve Jehovah on the day that they choose, then what you're doing is putting yourself in place of Jehovah, because this is his creation. It is he who has stated that this day has been set aside, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in our lesson tonight. This day has been set aside for a time of fellowship with him and honor of him, and at the very same time with one another. So as we come together, we even gain more strength to do what Jehovah has asked us to do. And so with that, we're going to get into the first part of our lesson, which is going to be a little bit of an explanation of how we're going to conclude our lesson for today, which is the whole concept of Pesach, which means to pass over. So with that, let us begin our little introduction on our service for tonight. I'm also sorry that I don't have the communion. We do participate in, I'll try to have that ready next Friday night. We do participate in the sacrament, the sacred or the set apart of our part of our service, which is for the communion, which is what the Messiah Yeshua taught us to do on the night of his last meal before his death. So with that, we're going to get into our lesson introduction tonight. So I thought I had an introduction, but I see I left that out. So then with that, let us begin our lesson 19. Evidently, I cut it out of my own lesson. Oh my goodness. So here we go. Jehovah said to Moshe, once again, in the Hebrew, understand what's going on. Jehovah said to Moshe, it's written in that manner because everything that he's saying Moses is going, or Moshe, which is the Hebrew, is going and telling the people. And so there was the tent of meeting, which is in the tabernacle. And many times Jehovah would call Moshe to the tabernacle and give him instructions. So Moshe would come out and say, this is what Jehovah says. Well, in our English, we say Jehovah said to Moshe. Moshe would come out and say, this is what Jehovah says. So he said, speak to the entire community of Israel. Tell them, you people are to be holy because I, Jehovah, your Elohim, am holy. So we know that this word holy, and that's why we highlighted it. We know that this word holy means set apart. It also infers special set apart. And so Jehovah is saying to the people, to us, that we are to be set apart because he, our Elohim, our God, is he's different. We are to be different because we are his children. So we are to be different than the world. And now he's telling the people, this is what you are to understand. Verse 3, every one of you is to revere his father and mother. We know that that's one of the 10 commandments, but look at how, in explaining holiness, Jehovah says the first thing is honor. We say revere or honor your father and mother. And the next thing is you are to keep my Shabbats or my Sabbaths. You are to keep them. Why? Because I am Jehovah, your Elohim. So we're going to see I am Jehovah your Elohim many times. Why? Once again, because it's beginning to transform us by renewing our minds. And in doing that to the children of Israel, he repeats himself and does it in different ways and formats so that he can solidify their understanding of what is being said. So he says, you are to keep my Sabbaths. They are his Sabbaths. We can't determine that Sunday is the Sabbath if Jehovah says it's not. It's not the first day of the week, it's the seventh day of the week. And most people, even in the so-called Christianity, when I say that we're followers of Yeshua. That's a better way, because Christianity has gotten such a bad name all over the planet that we want to make sure people understand we're followers of Yeshua, followers of Jesus. What they've done with Christianity is take away this first blessing, which comes from honoring the Sabbath as Jehovah says, this is my Sabbath. And then a double aspect of the Pesach ceremony of tonight is the first day of unleavened bread, which immediately follows the day of Passover for a 7-day festival that takes place among the Jewish people. The first day is a Sabbath. So this day, today, beginning this evening or sundown, remember it's not sundown in California yet, but in Georgia it's sundown, the Sabbath has began, and it even has additional meaning today because it's also the first day of unleavened bread. And so when the children of Israel were eating their Passover meal before the death angel came, they were eating it on the first day of unleavened bread because they ate it after the killing of the Passover lamb, which was done on the day of Passover, and it was over that evening. So the first thing he says is to honor your father and mother. Why? Because they are the elders, and we would pray that they're teaching the children what is correct, but it's the title as well. You must honor that title. Why? Because once you even get the understanding, you become a better father and mother. And so he's telling them how important it is to revere and to honor your mother and your father, that title. And once you have grown in the knowledge of what that is saying, then you're also better able to exemplify what a father does and what a mother does. All right, because it is through father and mother that new life comes into the world. Then he goes to verse 4. Do not turn to idols and do not cast metal gods for yourselves. I am Jehovah your Elohim. Once again, reminding them who it is that's talking to you. It is Jehovah, the creator of the universe, who's telling you these things, and you must learn to listen. Remember, the Messiah Yeshua would keep telling him, you say these things, but do you listen to what I'm saying? Are you going to obey what I'm telling you? Then we go to verse 5. When you offer a sacrifice of peace offerings to Jehovah, offer it in a way that will make you accepted. The whole focus of the system, of the sacrificial system, which we know in Hebrew is korban, K-O-R-B-A-N, means to get close to God. So when you want to get close to God, one way of acknowledging that that's what you want to do was, at this particular point in time, bringing an offering to Jehovah. Maybe you wanted some favor in something you were doing, or you wanted to thank Jehovah for peace and what's going on in your life. Well, you would bring this animal, right? And you would pray a blessing to Jehovah, thanking him for whatever it was that you were desiring or what had transpired. And then you would the animal would be slaughtered, the organs of the animal and the fat would be burned on the altar, right? And then there would be a waving a portion of the animal, and that portion of the animal, meaning the thigh area and the leg and all of that, would then go to the person who brought the animal for the sacrifice. They would eat that. Once you're doing it in the right spirit, that's why he says that will make you accept it. Offer it in a way that makes you accept it. That means he knows your spirit and he knows if it's right. The priest's responsibility is to offer it. That means it becomes then holy. Once the priest waves it as an offering, Jehovah says, now that is set apart. That is holy. So you must now listen to my rules about eating that. He says in verse 6, it is to be eaten the same day you offer it and the following day. But if any of it remains until the third day, it is to be burned up completely. And so that's instructions for eating, but you would eat that with your family. So in this whole process, then everybody would know what is going on and why it's taking place. Verse 7, if any of it is eaten on the third day, it will have become a disgusting thing and will not be accepted. So now if you're already disobeying Jehovah and then saying one thing and doing something else, he says it wasn't accepted. Now you violated all that you have done, demonstrates that your heart was not in the right place. He says in verse 8, moreover, everyone who eats it will bear the consequences of profaning something holy meant for Jehovah. So when you do it in the right way, it becomes holy and special. It says here that that person will be cut off from his people. So Jehovah is saying, since you don't want to do it in the manner in which I have instructed you to do it, then some fatality may come upon you. But just know that this offering was not accepted. So your desire to be close to God and to show your appreciation, you've already broken that by not doing what I told you about consuming this. Remember, at this particular point in time in the wilderness, where they were still around Mount Sinai, but during this time, the only time they were supposed to slaughter an animal, because once again, we're renewing your minds with some new information, was in order to eat the meat, was to make a what? An offering to Jehovah. Don't slaughter it anywhere else, because you have been taught so many things that are incorrect. You will infuse that into something that is special. So I want to keep this special, so do it in the manner in which I tell you. Don't go outside your tent somewhere out on the other side of the mountain or somewhere and kill an animal and then slaughter, cut it up and eat it. Don't do that. Anytime at this point that you're sacrificing, that you want to sacrifice an animal, bring him to the tabernacle. And that's why this is added significance. Now look what Jehovah says, when you harvest the ripe crops produced in your land. So now he's telling them when you get to the promised land, don't harvest all the way to the corners of your field, and don't gather the ears of grain left by the harvesters. Verse 10, likewise, don't gather the grapes left on the vine or fallen on the ground after harvest. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am Jehovah, your Elohim. Once again, Moses is being emphatic about this is a rule that you should adhere to. And what will it do? You will be blessed when you are obedient. Yes, you'll have better crops. Why? When you're just obedient. You leave that for the poor. You don't have to take a basket and pick it and give it to them. Let them go and pick whatever they want in this part of the field. Why? Because that is a good deed, and it shows you appreciation to Jehovah, the creator who made all that possible. So he's reminding us there that sharing and doing things like sharing with others that we know don't have, we are to do that. Verse 11, do not steal from, defraud, or lie to each other. Do not swear by my name falsely, which would be profaning the name of Elohim. Even when we say that we're worshiping on the Sabbath and we're not, you're saying that in the name of Jehovah, and that's false. That's not the Sabbath. Therefore, you bring what? You bring harm to his name. And so he holds that against us. I am Jehovah. Do not oppress or rob your neighbor. Specifically, you are not to keep back the wages of a hired worker all night until morning. Yeshua will speak to that, of course, when he was walking on the earth. Verse 14, do not speak a curse against a deaf person. That's interesting because a deaf person cannot hear. But what it basically means is you're almost mocking that person. And he says, or place an obstacle in the way of a blind person. Rather help them. Don't hinder them, help them. He says, fear your Elohim or your God. I am Jehovah. But for the grace of God, there you are. So show Jehovah that you are grateful that that particular condition is not with you. And so you help that person that has that condition. Verse 16, do not go around speaking slander among your people. Remember that can bring about zarat or leprosy. So you didn't want to do that. But also don't stand idly by when your neighbor's life is at stake. I am Jehovah. So you help your neighbor in time of crisis. Don't just stand there and say, I wish I could do something. You can do what it is you can do. Verse 17, don't hate your brother in your heart, but rebuke your neighbor frankly. That's not hate to tell your brother that what you're doing according to the word is wrong. That's pointing out that's a form of rebuke. What you are doing according to the word is wrong. That's not being judgmental. That's telling your neighbor, he says, frankly, so that you won't carry sin because of him. So if you allow something to transpire that you know is wrong and you don't speak up, then part of that sin becomes part of you because you didn't inform your neighbor that what he had done was sin. Verse 18, but don't take vengeance on or bear a grudge against any of your people. Rather, love your neighbor as yourself. We're going to see that again spoken in Deuteronomy, and we're going to see that Yeshua said the two greatest commands. Love the Lord God with all your heart, soul, strength, and might. Second one is love your neighbor as yourself. Yeshua said the same thing. Why? Because I am Jehovah. He says, observe my regulations. Going on, don't let your livestock mate with one of another kind. Don't sow your field with two different kinds of grain. In other words, there's an order to things. Maintain that order. Don't wear a garment of cloth made with two different kinds of thread. We don't understand all that today, but we do understand that certain things we don't mix. Why? Because it's not good for us. It might taste good, but we don't mix. Verse 20, if a man has sexual relations with a woman who is a slave intended for another man, and she has neither been redeemed nor given her freedom, there is to be an investigation. That woman still has rights. They are not to be put to death because she was not free. Now, it doesn't say he raped her. It says he had relations with a woman that was not his wife just because she had been captured in a battle or a war or something and made a servant to this particular person. You don't take advantage of her. In reparation, he is to bring a ram as a guilt offering. so he doesn't want to marry this woman, consider her his wife, then he has to bring a ram for a guilt offering before Jehovah for the sin he committed. So what you did was wrong. So you bring a guilt offering, and he will be forgiven for the sin he committed. That is, if he did not rape her, she consented. Verse 23, when you enter the land and plant various kinds of fruit trees, you are to regard its fruit as forbidden. For 3 years, it will be forbidden to you and not eaten. In the 4th year, all its fruit will be holy for praising Jehovah. But in the 5th year, you may eat its fruit, so that it will produce even more for you. I am Jehovah, your Elohim. We're going to get more clarification of this later in this chapter, as exactly how to apply that properly to what Jehovah was saying when you enter the land. And we're going to find out it was more or less for the trees you planted. 26, do not eat anything with blood. Do not practice divination or fortune telling. All of these are things or parts of the commands that Jehovah has given for those who are going to keep his covenant, but he repeats them over and over once again because of the fact that people are being transformed by the renewing of their minds. He goes on, don't round your hair at the temples or mar the edges of your beard. Those are things that there was a reason for that. It was because the nations that they were going to displace did those things as a religious practice. So he's telling them when you get to the land, he's already said when you get to the land and you have fruit. So he's telling them when you get to the land, don't take up the practices of those people that were in the land. That's why you don't do it. He goes on. Don't round your hair or mar your edges of your beard. Don't cut gashes in your flesh when someone dies, or tattoo yourselves. I am Jehovah. I'm going to leave the rest of that alone. Let's go on to 29. Do not debase your daughter by making her a prostitute, so that the land will not fall into prostitution and become full of shame. Some people in very poor countries still sell their daughters into prostitution in order to be able to eat. For a believer, that it is forbidden for them, but we ought to be the example of why that is the case. Then he goes in verse 30, once again, he says, keep my Shabbats, keep my Sabbaths, and revere my sanctuary. I am Jehovah. Do not turn to spirit mediums or sorcerers. Anyway, don't seek them out to be defiled by them. I am Jehovah, your Elohim. So look at just on this page, all the times he said, I am Jehovah. I am talking to you. I'm speaking these things to you. Do what I say. We go on to the next verse 32. Stand up in the presence of a person with gray hair. In other words, we learn to show respect to elders. Show respect for the old. You are to fear your Elohim. I am Jehovah. So he's once again, I am your honor these elders. Respect them. We, in our generation, my generation, we still do that. My children do it because that's what they were taught. Many of their friends don't know how to approach you or speak to you or what to say. And when you tell them something such as, you can call me Mr. Hodari or Mrs. Hodari, but you cannot call me Hodari. That's reserved for people of my age group. My children don't call me that, so you're not going to call me that. So you can always dress it up by putting a title before my name. So if a foreigner stays with you in your land, do not do him wrong. That's the institution of slavery as we know it in this country. Rather, treat the foreigner staying with you like the native born among you. You are to love him as yourself, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt, and Egypt has paid a very high price for their refusal to acknowledge that you are my people. I am Jehovah, your Elohim. Don't be dishonest when measuring length, weight, or capacity. Rather, use an honest balance scale, honest weights, an honest bushel dry measure, and an honest gallon liquid measure. Of course, gallon is not, that's a translation. That is not the unit of measure that was used at that time, but that gives us an understanding of a unit of measure. I am Jehovah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Observe all my regulations and rulings and do them. That's our problem. That's why, as we're being transformed by the renewing of our mind, when we learn more, we do more. So we don't jump on and belittle those who we may have been in that place a year or two ago ourselves. So we don't belittle them. We give them the proper example, and we teach them concerning what it is they're doing. So there's nothing wrong with telling people that we know, and people who will be doing the Easter egg thing and all of those things, where that comes from, and the fact that that has been given, that is actually profaning the name of God, because it's a pagan ceremony that is brought into existence and then given Yeshua, our Messiah, as the thing that makes it holy. Well, it's pagan. The thing that makes holy is obedience to what Jehovah tells us. So celebrating the Passover is obedience, and that makes for holiness. Easter is founded in pagan. Everything about it is pagan except for the dying on the cross, because Passover has a date, not a day. It could be any of the 7 days of the week, not a date. But that was done to honor the day that was set aside by the Roman Catholic Church as the Sabbath, but that is not the Sabbath. And so we have to obey his regulations and rulings. The more we learn about it, the more we can obey it. And with that, the Lord is pleased in what we're doing. Why? Because we're learning and we're observing and we're doing them. My regulations and rulings and do them. See, before we may have been trying to do them, but we weren't completely understanding all the connections of them. And so we were kicking against the goals, as we say, as he told them, oh, you're kicking against something that was for you. So we have to do them. Let's go on so we can get through this lesson in this hour that we spent together. What did I just do? Okay, here we are. Jehovah said to Moshe, verse 20, say to the people of Israel, once again, Moses would come and tell them, Jehovah says, if someone from the people of Israel or one of the foreigners living in Israel sacrifices one of his children to Molech, that was this pagan iron god who would be heated red hot to appease this god, so that people would take their child, put him in the arms of this red hot idol, and the child would die. He must be put to death. The person who did that, put them to death. They're doing that in the land that you're going into this place. So Jehovah already said that's what they're doing. But when you get there, don't do that. But if somebody, you capture some of them, which you weren't really supposed to do unless they wanted to be a follower of Jehovah. But in any case, don't do the practices that they're doing. He says, he must be put to death. The people of the land are to stone him to death. So they would bring him out to the town square. The judges would render a ruling, and all of the people would pick up stones and stone that person to death. I too will set myself against him and cut him off from his people. There's going to be an untimely death there because he has sacrificed his child to Molech, defiling my sanctuary and profaning my holy name. This person most likely would still come to the tabernacle because he believed in worshiping all the gods. And so he would still come inside the tabernacle or the courtyard and defile the area by his presence. And so that's why he says, you have defiled my sanctuary and profaned my holy name. So that's why on the day of Yom Kippur, on the 10th day of the 7th month, during that time, the blood was sprinkled over all the parts of the sanctuary, all of the parts of the furniture, everything was sprinkled with the blood of the lamb to make them once again holy. Why? Because people had come in a sinful, unclean condition and been around others. And you didn't even know it, but of course Jehovah knows it. So he's telling you that you're defiling the courtyard and the tabernacle have been defiled because of your behavior outside it. And you brought that in. And we talk about that a lot, about bringing that spirit around. Well, that's what you've done. Verse 4, if the people of the land look the other way, when that man sacrifices his child to Molech and fail to put him to death, then I will set myself against him, his family, and everyone who follows him to go fornicating after Molech and cut them off from their people. This is what was going on in the land before they got there. And guess what? The children of Israel did not listen. And at a point in their history, they did the very same things. And so the land then spit them out. Verse 6, the person who turns to spirit mediums, once again, saying that again, and sorcerers, to go fornicating or lusting after them, desiring to be around them, I will set myself against him and cut him off from his people. Therefore, verse 7, consecrate yourselves. You people must be holy. You must be set apart because I am Jehovah, your Elohim. Again, he says, observe my regulations and obey them. I am Jehovah who sets you apart to be holy. So the whole concept of being set apart or Jehovah's chosen people is centered around the fact that you weren't any better than anyone else. To be a follower of Yeshua is through the grace and mercy of Jehovah. On our own, we would not have done that. It is because he so desired that for us that we have done it. He set us apart. So now as children of Jehovah, as followers of Yeshua, who is the walking Torah, who demonstrated how we are to behave towards Jehovah, our God, and towards one another, then we've been set up. So he said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And this is how people will know that you're my disciple, your love one for another, but it's because you are obeying what I taught you. And I taught you how you can observe Torah amongst people who are profaning what they're supposed to be doing, but you can do it correctly. A person who curses his father and mother must be put to death. Once again, bringing that up. Having cursed his father or his mother, his blood is on him. Usually a curse was usually be using the name of Jehovah to punish your parents. That's what that means. Verse 10, if a man commits adultery with another man's wife, that is, with the wife of a fellow countryman, both the adulterer and the adulteress must be put to death. Both must be put to death. The man who goes to bed with his father's wife has disgraced his father sexually, and both of them must be put to death. Their blood is on them. If a man goes to bed with his daughter-in-law, we went over all of that in chapters what? 18. But now he's going and reiterating it again and telling the people again, because Jehovah understands how to transform us by renewing our minds. If a man, verse 14, a man marries a woman and her mother, it is depravity. They are to be put to death by fire, both he and they, mother and daughter, so that there will not be depravity among you. If a man has sexual relations with an animal, he must be put to death, and you are to kill the animal. If a woman approaches an animal and has sexual relations with it, you are to kill the woman and the animal. Their blood will be on them. I've heard about different places that demon worshipers do that, bring animals in to have sex with women and make men have sex with animals. If a man takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and has sexual relations with her, and she consents, it is a shameful thing. They are to be cut off publicly. He has had sexual relations with his sister, and he will bear the consequences of wrongdoing. Reiterate what was already stated, but making certain that the people are being transformed or taught what is proper. If a man goes to bed with a woman in her menstrual period and has sexual relations with her, he has exposed the source of her blood, and she has exposed the source of her blood. Both of them are to be cut off from their people. That's a fascinating thing, because you would think that during that time, that is not something that either person would desire. But in a sinful world, when a person wants sex, it doesn't matter what time or anything else, they just want it. Well, that's a person that's led by his flesh. And if she can say no. That's why the word says this. Why? Because she's supposed to tell him it's wrong. Let's go on. You have sexual relation with your mother's sister or your father's sister. A person who does this has had sexual relation with his close relative. They will bear the consequences of their wrongdoing. So Jehovah is separating things different from all that they may have seen and known. But they're being transformed by the renewing of their mind. He says, if a man goes to bed with his uncle's wife, man takes his brother's wife, it is uncleanness. He had disgraced his brother sexually, they will be childless. So now Jehovah is pronouncing or saying there will be no pregnancy with them, with that union. You ought to observe all my regulations and rulings and act on them. Not just saying it, act on them. We learn more, we do more, so that the land to which I am bringing you will not vomit you out. Do not live by the regulations of the nations which I am expelling ahead of you. These things I'm telling you not to do are because the people that are doing them, you're going in there to kill them, to take that land. And they're dying because they're doing these abominable practices. You are not to do them. Do not live by the verse 24. But to you I have said, you will inherit their land. So he's saying, I'm giving you that land. I'm going to empower you to take it, but don't pick up their practices. I will give it to you as a possession, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Jehovah, your Elohim, who has set you apart from other peoples. Followers of Yeshua, we have been set apart from other people. So we are to behave and observe the regulations that Yeshua came to represent how to do it. Therefore, you are to distinguish between clean and unclean animals and between clean and unclean birds. Do not make yourself detestable with an animal, bird, or reptile that I have set apart for you to regard as unclean. Don't eat these unclean things. because you're defiling yourself, and I have forbidden it. So you're being disobedient. When you learn more, you do more. Rather, you people are to be holy for me, because I, Jehovah, am holy, and I have set you apart from other people. Your behavior is supposed to be different. They ought to look at you and know there's something that's going on here. And Jehovah does that so that they can ask questions. But if you got questionable character and behavior, your testimony might be a little strange. So that you can belong to me. That's why you do this, because you belong to Yeshua. He paid the price. He died in our place. A man or woman who is a spirit or medium or sorcerer must be put to death. They are to stone them to death. Their blood will be on them. So once again, all of that, stop. Jehovah is saying they're doing that in that land. You're not to do that. You're to be different. With that, that concludes our lesson on what? Kedoshim, which means holiness, because Jehovah said, be you holy, for I, Jehovah, your Elohim, am holy. I have set you apart for my own special design or my special purpose. And I want you to honor that by being obedient so that others will learn what it is to be obedient to the creator of the universe. We don't make stuff up. We look and follow what he has instructed us. We can't sanctify, set apart, make holy a pagan festival by invoking the name of Yeshua. It can't be done. And it's being done in great measure coming up soon. All right, let us go on to our Passover meat. How much? Oh, I got 10 minutes. We're going to try to get through Passover in 10 minutes. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, the whole Passover celebration is centered around Exodus 12, verses 21 through 51. And during the celebration, during the Passover celebration, you would read this text, and the whole meal and everything is centered around this text. Then Moshe called for all the leaders of Israel. This is in Exodus chapter 12. Select and take lambs for your families and slaughter the Pesach lamb. That means the Passover lamb in English. Take a bunch of hyssop leaves and dip it in the blood which is in the basin, and smear it on the two sides and the top on the top of the door frame. The top and the two sides of the door frame. Then none of you is to go out of the door of his house until morning. That's going to be early morning, because after midnight, Pharaoh's firstborn is going to die, and he's going to tell the people to get out. Then, verse 23, for Jehovah will pass through to kill the Egyptians. But when he sees the blood on the top and on the two sides, Jehovah will pass over the door and will not allow the slaughterer to enter your houses and kill you. That kind of gets your attention. You are to observe this as a law, you and your descendants forever. When you come to the land which Jehovah will give you, as he has promised, you are to observe this ceremony. Before we came into the knowledge, we didn't know anything about this. We thought it was only for Jews, even though Paul told us we were grafted in to the system, to the covenants of the Jewish people. We didn't know, so we didn't do. Now we know, so now we do. When your children ask you, not about the eggs and the bunny, but when your children ask you, what do you mean by this ceremony? See, there's a ceremonial dinner. Now, the parts of the dinner, those things have been added to give some beauty and spirit to the occasion. but it's based on this text. It is the sacrifice of Jehovah's Pesach or Passover, because Jehovah passed over the houses of the people of Israel, Egyptians, but spared our houses. The people of Israel bowed their heads and worshiped when Moses told them this. Then the people of Israel went and did. If they didn't, it wasn't no issue. If they didn't do it, they were going to die. Firstborn male was going to die in that house. So it said here, they went and did as Jehovah had ordered Moshe and Aharon. That is what they did. At midnight, Jehovah killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. Look at the price for redemption. All the firstborn Egyptian males were killed, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. Pharaoh got up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was horrendous wailing in Egypt, for there wasn't a single house without someone dead in it. He summoned Moshe and Aharon by night and said, "Up and leave my people, both you and the people of Israel. Go, serve Jehovah as you have said." Remember, that was after the 10 plagues. "Take both your flocks, your herds, as you said, and get out of here, but bless me too." So now Pharaoh is saying, Jehovah that I rejected 10 times, on the 11th time, killed all these people. Prayer blessing over us, because Egypt will never be the same. The Egyptians pressed to send the people out of the land quickly, because they said, otherwise we'll all be dead. The people took their dough before it had become leavened. You have to let the bread rise. They hadn't allowed the bread to rise, so they were told, don't put no leaven in there. Put them on their shoulder and got to stepping. The people of Israel had done what Moshe had said. They had asked the Egyptians to give them silver, gold, jewelry, and clothing. And Jehovah had made the Egyptians so favorably disposed toward the people that they had let them have whatever they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. The people of Israel traveled from Ramesses to Sukkot, some 600,000 men on foot, not counting children. This is read and talked about to the children. Look at verse 38. A mixed crowd also went up with them. So these are people that were not of the tribes of Israel, but they had heard about what was going on. They had seen these plagues come upon their land. Most of them would be poor, because the wealthy always think their money gonna get them out. They said, we want to go too. So they honored the killing of the animal and all of that, as well as livestock in large numbers, both flocks and herd. They all went out. They baked matzah loaves from the dough they had brought out of Egypt, since it was unleavened, because they had been driven out of Egypt without time to prepare supplies for themselves. Verse 40, the time the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years to the day, all the divisions of Jehovah left the land of Egypt. And we're going to see they didn't just walk out in a mob. They walked out in order, because they had been instructed how it was going to be done. This was a night when Jehovah kept vigil to bring them out of the land of Egypt. And this same night continues to be a night when Jehovah keeps vigil for all the people of Israel through all their generations, meaning us as well, because we've been grafted in to the covenants and promises. Jehovah said to Moshe, verse 43, and to Aharon, this is the regulation for the Pesach lamb. No foreigner is to eat it at that time. But if anyone has a slave he bought for money, when you have circumcised him, he may eat it. Our circumcision is the sacrifice that Yeshua has made for us. That is our form of circumcision. Paul is going to explain that in Romans. But if anyone has a slave, when you say he may eat it, neither a traveler nor a hired servant may eat it. It is to be eaten in one house. You are not to take any of the meat outside the house, You are not to break any of its bones. The whole community of Israel is to keep it. If a foreigner staying with you wants to observe Jehovah's Pesach, all his males must be circumcised. We have been circumcised through the Messiah Yeshua, because we were found in him, Paul says, in Ephesians, before the foundation of this world. So whatever he endured, and he was circumcised on the 8th day, we have endured through what he did. The same teaching is to apply equally to the citizen and to the foreigner living among you. All the people of Israel did just as Jehovah had ordered Moshe and Aharon. On that very day, Jehovah brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their divisions. They didn't come out in just running out. They came out marching out in order, tribe by tribe. Here we have a plate. If we were having our Seder, which means our festival, we would have the matzah, which would be matzah crackers. We would have zera, which is the lamb shank, and we had some good lamb last year. We would have an egg, which basically talks about desire, and the fact of the matter is that the wholeness of the egg has special meaning as well. Then we have the maror, which were the bitter herbs. Then we have the carpus, which is a mixture of apples and nuts and honey, the sweet taste. And then we have vegetables, or in this case, beans, or produce from the land, produce that we are thankful that we have. So all this is a part of a Passover Seder or Passover ceremony in the home. And then you partake of that, you read this. There are many other aspects to that that can be done. But as you see here, he didn't tell us what to eat other than the lamb. Everything else they were free to eat. They ate what was in the land. But in the ceremonial way of learning this, then we have gotten to this particular plate order of what should be in a Passover Seder. And of course, the wine. I didn't put number 7, which is the wine. Why? Because wine is symbolic for us, and we incorporate in the Pesach Seder, we incorporate as believers in Yeshua that he was our Passover lamb. So just as the children of Israel killed a lamb, Yeshua became our Passover lamb, and we incorporate that in our celebration, our Pesach Seder that we have in our homes. Thank you so much for joining me. That concludes our lesson for tonight. I'm sorry that the more I studied this, the more I became to say I should be somewhere else. But next year, God willing, and we have breath, we definitely will have our Passover Seder, along with the 3 festivals that we were told that we must come together in honor of being children of Jehovah. Pesach, then we come to Sukkot, and then, Shavuot, which is Pentecost, and then we come to Sukkot, which is the tents, or living in tents. So those 3 times he said we ought to come together, and we should do that. The other things, the problem with them is that they're profaning the name of Jehovah by bringing pagan activities into something that then is done in the name of Jehovah, and that profanes his name. Thank you all so much for joining me. Let us pray. Jehovah Elohim, I thank and praise you for this time. I thank you for the opportunity to share your word with your people. I thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit that comes to guide us into all truth. Thank you for opening up our hearts and our mind to receive your word, and for empowering us that we can be doers and not hearers only. In the name of Yeshua, our Messiah, our Lord, Savior, and King, we pray. Amen. All right. Shalom, everyone. Blessings to you. And remember, Pesach, Passover. Shalom.